Okay, so I want to talk to you about photo etch for a second here because as you can see in the photograph here, there's a platform here that I want to model as well. I had to narrow this particular stand, as you can see. I can just lay it on here for a second. Now I didn't narrow the front really here, but I narrowed the back because I had to squeeze in the space, so I pushed it closer to the building because I wanted to keep this section here for the platform, which is important to the model. And so I want to put photo etch in here because it's really right up front, this model, and it's a part that you want to, you don't just want to put a solid sheet there, but I mean, if you can help it. So you know how when you go to hobby shops, sometimes you look around, like especially the military model section, they have photo etch. I mean, it doesn't have to be, model railroad specific, right? Like these guys, Aber, are really good. Like they're from Poland. And it says here professional update and upgrade set for scale plastic models. So it's not specific to the genre, to any genre really. Anyway, so I picked up a couple packs of this because when I see this stuff, I grab it because it doesn't, last, right? Or if it's sitting there, someone will get it if you waffle on it. So I have a piece, well, a fair bit, but I had this piece right here, and look at this. I guess it was an offcut from when I was doing a logging truck build or whatever, adding a rack, a headache rack. And anyway, look at that. It's perfect, eh? So I'm going to add this in when I do my railings, and that'll make a nice touch, won't it? Isn't that nice? I just love it when I have stuff like this kicking around. Anyway, that's the name of the company. You could look them up and probably order mail order too. Okay, so we're going to build this vent pipe, which is a nice feature on this model that I really like. So I'll show you what I'm going to use for this, but you can see there'll be one piece here, and then this piece could be made up of 3 pieces. I'm going to try to do it maybe with 2 pieces or 1. Now, the thing is, to do this kind of a bend here, if you use tube, it'll probably kink, right? You can put it in boiling water and try that. Like, that's a method. I don't like to do that though, but I'll show you how I do it. What you do is you telescope the smaller sizes to make it into solid rod, and then when you bend it, it doesn't kink or break, okay? So you can see these are the 3 sizes I'm going to use. Number 225, which is the outer diameter of the vent pipe, and then I'm going to telescope 3/32, use that for mounting tube, and then this 3/64 rod fits inside. See, like that? That's another nice thing about Evergreen, right? Like a lot of their tubular and square sections, rectangle, like they all sort of telescope that way, so you can use them for mounting, pipes and adding sections, joining long sections together, right? And you could join the same diameter of this pipe with a centerpiece like that, 5/32, 3/32 plug or joinery, and then that's a nice thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this little piece first, which is the first section of the pipe. Okay, so now I'm going to run a section down, a straight section, but I'm going to cut it extra long like this because the bend actually takes place right about here. So I want to have a little bit to hold on to, right? Remember how I told you again about cutting the piece longer than you need so you can grab it and bend, shape with, and you cut it off when the bend or that particular part's finished. So we have this sort of undetermined angle here, which I just eyeballed cut, and then I just need to cut this one to match it. Okay, so all I do is I just eyeball it, and then if it doesn't match, I do a dry run and I just, just sand it. Just tweak it with a sanding block to get it to match up. Okay, like that. All right, and then we won't cut off the bottom section yet because we want to slide some tubing into that and create a bend here. All right. Okay, so here's a quick little tip. If you have problems or trouble getting a tube to fit inside another tube, if you want it to go in deeper, like this will fit normally, but it's tight, but I need to get it in to where my finger is, and it won't, it's just too tight. So just take this piece and just take your blade, and don't carve like this, scrape it like this, okay? And then turn it as you're scraping it. If you can find another piece of stock that's like possibly 80 thou is a bit too loose, and this has an opening like a tube in the end, so I can insert another piece in there, which is a nice option to have. So that's what I'll do, and I got to go in up to about where my finger is, so now I can get in there. See that? Okay. Okay, so now I have the inside of this 5/32 pipe packed out, but there's still a hole, an opening in the end, right? So if I try to bend that, there's enough opening there in that elbow which it might deform. So we want to create this into a solid piece. Okay, so now I'm going to take this piece of 80 thou, which I mentioned was number 212, right, earlier. So this is the third piece. So I want to go up to about where my finger is, like that much. So this will slide right in. Okay, just like that. So now I can attempt the bend. Probably use, oh, this will work, this file. Okay. Okay, so we're getting the pipe shaped here. So what I did here was I cut the pipe a little bit too short. So I had to add a section right in here. Let me just point this out to you. This little piece here, I had to add in there about a 1/2 inch section. Remember how I talked about telescoping here? See, you can do that, right? Now, what about the unsightly seam? Well, that's going to get covered with a strap. You'll see on the photo here, if you make your cuts in the right place, there's a strap here and here, which is here and here. So that's no problem. And the advantage to, I mean, it's always nice to try to do it in less pieces as possible, but one of the advantages of doing it this way too is if you make a separate piece like this, I'm not going to push it all the way on yet, because it'll go up just right where I want it, is I can turn it, see, and adjust it, because there's another return or bend right here that goes down along this I-beam. And if I want to tweak that back and forth, then I don't have to keep tweaking the 45 up here, right? You know what I mean? So now I'll make the bottom piece will probably be one section. And because I packed out the inside, the ID, remember? See the bend? You can, if it gets a little bit of a deform on the side, just a little bit, maybe on the elbow, you can just sand it down a bit. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? Okay, so remember how I talked to you about telescoping pieces together? Okay, right? So there's three pieces that make up these like this pipe, right? There's the outer one, which is 5/32, and then the inner sleeve is 3/32. I had to scrape a bit to get it all the way in, past to where you want to bend it, and then you slide in the which size was it that I used? 3/64 rod in, so that you make this bend section solid. So that when you get a bend like this, it doesn't kink, right? Now, when you glue, like when you make up this end piece like that on the full long length, you only glue the ends here, like just this section here, and let all this float inside, so you can move it back and forth later when you want to cut the size. Because if you have to cut or shorten a piece, you can push the piece out of the way and then pin it, see? Like I might want to shorten this section, but if it's glued all the way, you're going to have a solid core and you got to drill it out, and it's a real nightmare. So this way you can always move a piece, either the 3/32 one or the solid core on the inside. You have those two options available, so you can join your pipe together, and you can adjust your pipe like this, see? Just say you want to route that through a frame. And then you can just put a band around that seam to clean it up, like a mounting point or whatever, right? Okay. Oh, it's too long. Okay, so then just cut a 1/4 inch off here, 1/8, and then put the pin in. See? I'll show you it on the model here. Okay, so see here, this is 3/32 pin. Doesn't matter. Like I could have cut that off and used the 3/64, but you know, I just happen to have that extra piece there. So I slide that in like that. There's my first piece in. Now there's a railing in here, but I want to have the flexibility to, you know, move this and adjust this. So I slide this on like this, and then now I can adjust, see? Right? I can adjust this vent pipe so it has a nice clean, you know, engineered run like that. And then I can cover that seam up. I'll tweak that and put a band around it, a thin 10 thou band to hide it. Because once again, on the prototype, see all the band work on it? So if these are seams here, I'm going to put a band, either 20 thou rod or, you know, 15 thou by 40 thou strapping or whatever, and then just put a pin behind it or a block or something to mount it. Okay? Okay, so just to finish off the vent pipe, you know, the end is typically quite thick, like the inner diameter tubing there. So what I like to do is I just like to clean that up and give it a little more scale look. Just turn it in your finger with a knife like that. And I know a lot of you probably already know this, but just, you know, puts a finishing touch on it. That way it looks more scale, right? And like if you're doing pipes like on 1/25th scale vehicles or whatever, like a big 2-inch big block pipes or something, you know, that those sticking out the back, you know. But anyway, yeah, it just cleans that up. Okay. So somebody mentioned about how to put ribs on a piece of pipe or downspout or tube, whatever. Well, it's the same way as the cylinder, right? You just tag, in this case, a piece of 10 by 20 thou strip. Okay, so here's a piece that's fixed. I want to cover that seam, so I treat it the same way. I tagged it first. Trick is not to try to do it too soon. Like, let the glue set up good for 15 or 20 minutes before you pull a wrap on it. Once you do a couple, you'll be fine. This part here that I'm doing is the access hatch that goes on the side of the funnel. I noticed it in one of the photographs. It must be to service the inside of the cylinder or the extractor. You know, maybe they get clogged up, or I don't really know, but you can sort of see under here. See? There's a big hatch there with hinges on it, a locking latch. So it must be, if this funnel gets, I don't know, needs to be cleaned or purged or whatever, it's an access hatch. There's probably one on the top too, I believe there is. So I just want to show you the possibilities with evergreen plastic. See, like, this is a hatch, okay, for the canister. So, I mean, it's not going to be functional, but it shows you what's possible with evergreen plastic. You know, and a little drill bit, right? And some patience. Practice, see. That's 20 thou pin, 40 thou by 40 thou square rod, 15 by 30 strip, and then some round rings. And this is all scrap, right? See? So this is how I'm going to make the derail. I'm going to make the derail similar to this. Okay, so I just want to talk about ladders for a second here. You can see that each hole here, I'm doing 2 rails at once, and they're 12 inches apart. The Canadian standard is 12 to 14 inches between the rungs. As far as the rails, it varies. Like, they can be 12 to 24 inches. So this is really tedious to try and film, and it's not really much to film anyway, but the trick is to use a thick shank drill bit like this if you have one, and you just use your fingers, because the weight of the mounter, like, you don't want to push too hard on this material. This is HO Scale 2x4. Okay, you wouldn't normally, you know, it's probably pretty heavy in scale, but it's such a small profile. This is actually smaller than what I did for the barge slip. I did 40 by 40 thou. You can see this is 22 by 43 thou. So it's half the thickness roughly in terms of a thinner rail, so it works pretty good. Otherwise you just can't drill it. But you can drill this though, and if you're really careful with it, just with the pencil mark, you just the weight of the bit. And if you don't mind doing this kind of thing, I don't mind doing it. Like, I can just put the radio on and just drill, you know, all night. Well, not all night, but you know, I plow through this stuff just steady. And so this is like 2 long lengths, so it'll more than cover my ladder work that I need on the extractor. And then I'm going to use 20 thou rod for the rungs. You know how many times I've tried to shoot this scene? Every time, if I turn the camera off, it'll go smooth like this. Every time I turn the camera on, I keep dropping them. So that means it's time to quit. Okay, so let's revisit the ladders here. I did ladder work with a little bit different stock than this when I built the barge slip. I think I used 40 by 40 thou, and then I used 20 or 25 thou rod. But in this case, I'm going to build up some ladders with the HO Scale 2x4s and 20 thou rod. Now 2x4s ideally would be a little bit fat for rails, but once again, there's only so much material by the time you drill the hole, right? So, and they look pretty good actually. Here's one that I built, and I'll just show you the difference here between this one and this HO one that you can buy from Plastruct. HO Scale, but it says right here 1/100 ABS ladder. So they're generic, right? Even though they say HO Scale, they're not really scale ladders. I mean, if you think 2x4s are fat, you know, imagine what these are. They're probably 4x4s or 6x6s or something. But anyway, this is why I like to build my own ladders. See the difference here? This ladder's scale, okay, so it has the it has, well, I mean, they vary in width from 12 inches to 24, and then there's the 8 to 14 inch spacing in the rungs. So these are 12 by, let's see, they're wow, yeah, those are 18 inches wide by 12 inch spacing on the rungs. So my rungs are the same, whereas my ladder here is 24 inches because it's an industrial ladder, right? So, and they're generally wider. But you can see there how they look, and when they're painted they look even better. So are they hard to make, difficult? Well, they're challenging. Let me just say that, and I'll show you how I do them. So what I do is, maybe I should zoom in here a bit. Just hold on a sec. Okay, so once this first rail is done and we nip off all the ends, right? Remember how it was all curved like that? Then we basically start with our other piece of rail that's pre-drilled that we did, 2 together, remember, in parallel. And then we just start feeding this rail onto the ends of the rods, and it's quite flexible. You can bend it, but as you do it, just push the rail down tighter. And then when you get to the end like this, like you're just chasing it and you're feeding it on, see? You can be quite aggressive with this plastic. That's the one nice thing about evergreen, is it's soft. It's softer than Plastruct, actually, than the ABS material, which is why I like it. Because it's robust and flexible, so you can refine it a bit. Okay, so there. So once you chase that rail all the way down, just feeding it on over top. It helps if a lot of these are similar in length, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so then I take a straight edge like this, and I just lay this, you know, the glued side down that's been nibbled off, right? Okay. Now, I don't know how many of you have one of these, but these are the little rulers, the little drafting rulers, right? You know, with the little clip for your shirt pocket, which I dropped on the floor. So what I do is, this works out to about 18 inches wide in HO, which is really good for these kind of ladders. And so I just pinch that rear rail up against this straight edge like this. Okay. Now you can tape that in place, you can pin it in place, you can do whatever method you want. And this is what I do. Like, see how this here, now you just take this and you just, with a pair of tweezers, I find works good. And you just push that rail up tight against the straight edge. Just a little bit at a time, in the same way that you fed the rail onto the dowels to begin with. Make sure that this rail back here is pinched between this and this upper one that's sitting on top of the rungs. This will straighten your ladder out, and it'll make it perfect. Okay. So now that rail is nice and straight, see? Now I can pinch that. See those two rails in there? Pinched in nice and tight. You don't want to let it slide underneath. Take some cement. Now this will probably maybe adhere lightly the rail to the wood, but it'll just pop with a chisel X-Acto blade, right? Okay, so now that this is set up, you can lift this off, and you can see we got a pretty nice looking little ladder there, right? That's even, the rails are nice and even. And then it's going to come in there and nip all those little extras off.